act of citizen science. Reef's red dive flag logo has been part of our identity since the beginning. While we're no longer using it everywhere to talk about Reef, you'll continue to see it in connection with some programs. We haven't got our new name tags yet. The signs are still coming. Wine glasses. You know, they're going to be retro. They'll be like the vintage material that has probably. We might see them on eBay, that's for sure. So anyway, we're very excited about that. Wanted to share it with all of our friends here tonight. So here's a little blurb for our upcoming programs. Next Tuesday, that is next Tuesday, right? February 20th is a fish in our uncommon fishes of the Galapagos. How many people here have been diving in the Galapagos? How many people are going to the Galapagos later this year? So this is a program you won't want to miss. If it's on your bucket list, if you're thinking of it, it'll teach you how to identify the common fishes that you're likely to see there. And it's presented by Stacy Henderson, who was he's still staff member, but he was based here, near and dear to many people. So even if you've already been to the Galapagos, you're not going, you need a Stacy Henderson fix, join us for that. Those programs are recorded, so you can see them anytime if you decide to go later to the Galapagos. Locals paddle the Florida Keys tomorrow, Valentine's Day. They do this on a monthly basis, right, Carolyn? I think she's the one that organized this. And it's free, but they suggest a $10 donation, and the proceeds will go to Reef. Every month they do it benefiting a different organization. So I know a lot of our interns and other people are going to be there, and you're welcome to join that. And then, excuse me, where is that at? Paddle the Florida Keys is mile marker 90.
It's right on the creek, right?
Right on Tavernier Creek, yeah.
For those of us who aren't locals, exactly what is
this? Great, thank you. It's a paddle the Florida, so it's kayaking and paddleboard, I believe, stand-up paddle. No, all the equipment is included. Hey, I should have made my announcement.
Those who are here, say, for a few days, and might be
yes.
Perhaps you could tell us a bit about what that is.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not sure if you need, I have a flyer on it separately. If you, I don't know if you have to sign up in advance. I don't think so. Just go there at 5:30 and say you want to join. They'll give you the equipment, and all of that's included as a guided tour for about an hour, I think, at the dusk. And I believe it is paddle boards and kayaks. Which is sunset. Should be gorgeous. Yeah. And then the last announcement here is that Reef at the Community Health Fair, our interns go around to all kinds of community events around town, so you're likely to see us there. And I just wanted to start highlighting places where we're planning to be. So if you're going to be at the Community Health Fair, that's at Key Largo Park here by the pool on Saturday or Sunday, please stop by and see the announcement, the interns. The next Fish and Friends next month, we had a change in the schedule. I have a flyer here. It will be Dr. Jason Spadero from Moat Marine Laboratory, but he's not talking about coral. He's probably going to talk a little bit about coral because they're from Moat, but he's going to talk about crabs. Super interesting crabs, you guys, that like help keep the algae down on the corals. It's part of keeping the corals healthy in that. And he's a great speaker. So that's the next one. It's the March 12th, Tuesday, March 12th.
Also still the same.
Yes, exactly. Second Tuesday. Okay. Welcome new staff. So Mead Croca is our new education coordinator. I don't know if you were here last month. You remember there were like 20 of us that were new. No, there were like 4 new interns and I was new. And we only have one new person for you to meet today, and that's Mead. Mead, you want to come up here and stand next to JD? You're talking to the...
Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. I know I spoke to a few of you throughout the evening here, and I look forward to meeting each and every one of you in the coming events that we're going to be doing. My name is Mead. I just moved down here from Wilmington, North Carolina. I went to school there at UNCW doing environmental science, biological anthro, and chemistry, which is a mouthful. But for the past few years, I've been running a marine science and surf-based summer camp up there, and saw an opportunity for an education coordinator here. And since I absolutely love environmental education, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. So just moved down here about a month-ish ago, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm really excited with all the projects that Reef has going on. I'm going to be working heavily with the Ocean Explorers program, especially once we have the new MCC open. I'm really excited to watch that grow and expand and reach as many local and visiting people as we possibly can. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. And if anyone wants to chat after or at any other event, just feel free to come on up. Thank you.
We usually ask if there's any other announcements that people want to make for the good of the community. Upcoming fish things, ocean things. No, we're all good. Going once, twice. All right. They want to hear you is that's what's really going on here. So without further ado, then I present JP Brooker, Director of Florida Conservation for Ocean Conservancy. And I just want to call your attention to the tiny words at the bottom about who graciously making this program possible. In part through grant agreements from Florida Department of Environmental Education, Coastal Management Program, and the Office for Coastal Management. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself and do all that. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to speak. It's an honor. I'm a big fan of Reef, and a big fan of all you guys for coming out tonight and every night that you have one of these to learn more about specific interests in the ocean. And my talk tonight is really going to focus on Florida, specifically on the Sunshine State and what makes Florida important from an advocacy perspective. I'm actually a registered lobbyist, and I'm a lawyer by training, and I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and in Tallahassee talking about marine conservation issues and trying to develop laws that will protect Florida's ocean and coast. And so that's what we're talking about tonight, the currents and crossroads, sort of the vantage point that we're at here in Florida, and what we can do to develop a vision for Florida's oceans and coasts. And I'd like it to be collaborative, so I'll probably ask questions, and feel free to raise your hand, if you can answer some questions here and there. So for example, what are we looking at here on this first slide? Anyone know this? Which is just down the road here a little ways, right? Okay, very good. So it's y'all's backyard. I like to, before I start, do a land and water acknowledgement, and I'm going to read this. And has anyone seen a land acknowledgement done before? I'm trying to make this a normal practice in my talks. So Ocean Conservancy acknowledges that our work takes place on the ancestral homelands and waters of sovereign native nations, including the Ais, the Tequesta, the Calusa, and today the Seminole Tribe of Florida and the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians of Florida. We pay our respects to the traditional custodians, the elders past and present, by fully recognizing Indigenous sovereignty, as well as the historical and contemporary relationship between Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. It is within our responsibility as a conservation advocacy group to uphold knowledge about the history of the Florida environment with the original stewards of this land and water that we live, learn, and work on. We encourage all Floridians to read and learn about ways to support our local Indigenous communities in their efforts to preserve Seminole and Miccosukee land and water rights, cultural practices, and the conservation of the environment. It is our hope that acknowledging the land and water helps us to better understand that harm has been done and to address the legacies of violence in our communities in order to create a pathway to true healing. So I also like to think about the Indigenous people who actually lived here. Are you familiar with the Indigenous people of the Florida Keys? Who lived here? Anyone? The Tequesta. The Tequesta and the Calusa people in particular, right? And so we suspected Tequestas and Calusas lived in the Florida Keys as long ago as 800 years before Christ's existence, right? And we do know that after nearly 200 years of subjugation by Spanish colonizers, only around 270 Calusa people remained in the Keys. And it was in 1711 that the Spanish evacuated those remaining Calusa to Cuba, and subsequently 200 Calusa died, leaving only maybe 70 Calusa left.
Forcible evacuation.
Yes, it was, yeah. And the Calusa predominantly had been whittled down from thousands of people to only 270 by illness and by violence. And illness and violence took them in Cuba as well. So we like to remember that. We like to remember that history when we're thinking about Florida. Florida is rich with this type of history, no matter where you're from. I'm from the east coast of Central Florida, from Brevard County, where we have the Timucua people. I now live in St. Petersburg, the Tocobaga people. And of course, the Seminole and Miccosukee people still have a prominent presence, really throughout Florida, but specifically in South Florida and West Central Florida. So just a little bit about me, my introduction. As I said, I am a native of Brevard County, Florida. I'm a sixth-generation Floridian. Actually, people in my family were in Key West in the 1850s. They moved up to Tampa following the cigar factories, and Vicente Ibor, who moved a lot of the cigar industry to Tampa. I'm based currently in St. Petersburg, Florida. As I said, I'm a lawyer. I'm a member of the Florida Bar, federal courts for the Southern and Middle Districts of Florida. I have been elected to the Executive Council of the Environmental and Land Use section of the Florida Bar. I teach ocean and coastal law and policy, and I also teach fisheries law at Stetson University College of Law. And I sit on various committees, including the Coral Advisory Panel for the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council. I spent a lot of years working on fisheries policy in Washington, D.C. in defense of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So if you have specific fish-related questions, I can potentially answer them for you. Just to talk a little bit about Ocean Conservancy. Have you heard of Ocean Conservancy before? And I won't be offended if you say no. We're the nation's oldest marine conservation nonprofit organization, working nationally and globally. We've been around since 1972. We were founded as the Delta Corporation, so we've had a name change. Originally, we were focused on whale conservation, and we were inspired by John Denver, who was a prominent whale advocate, and he went and met with a Navy admiral, and they got together and started Ocean Conservancy, or as it was known at the time, the Delta Corporation. We have around 200 employees, mostly scientists and lawyers, and we work at that nexus of science and policy. We really want to make positive policy changes that have a scientific underpinning. And so we're not going to advocate for something unless we have a strong scientific background. We have 300,000 members and 1.5 million online activists. I think that number has gone up. And our annual operational budget now is around 75 million. In Florida, the main office is in St. Petersburg. We historically have had offices in Key West. We also currently have an office in Miami and an office in Jacksonville. And I oversee our Florida work statewide. So we have a staff of around 8 in the state of Florida, plus another 20 or so cross-cutters, mostly in Washington, D.C. We have offices in Texas, California, Washington, Alaska, and then we have offices or staff in Vietnam, Indonesia, and Australia. So we really do have a global presence, but we focus a lot on international policy issues as well as domestic policy issues. And so who remembered what happened in 2010?
Are you guys a 501c3 or C4?
We're 501c3. We do not have a C4 status.
Okay, but you are a registered lobbyist.
I'm a registered lobbyist, correct. And we have several registered lobbyists, yeah. BP oil spill happened, right? And who was here in the Keys at the time during the BP oil spill? Would you recall any impacts? Did you see anything firsthand from the BP oil spill?
Very little here.
In the Upper Keys,
Correct.
yeah.
The tourists didn't come down.
I was going to say in terms of economic impacts, there could have been some pretty significant ones, right? And so in the wake of the BP oil spill, we really advocated strongly for comprehensive restoration to occur Gulf-wide in terms of getting federal funds down to the Gulf, to all 5 Gulf states, to really invest in the local economies, make it so that tourists would come back, and also restore the economies of places that had been decimated. So we were instrumental in helping the NRDA laws get passed, the natural resource damages laws. As I said, we've worked on the fish conservation front for a long time in Magnuson-Stevens defense. Has anyone heard of the Magnuson-Stevens Act? Some of you have, yeah. Is anyone a commercial fisherman or has fished commercially? No. But do you fish in federal waters? Who knows where federal waters begin in the Keys? 3 nautical miles in which? The Gulf or the Atlantic? What about in the Gulf?
Longer, but I can't
It's-
say.
it's
12?
9 nautical miles. So there's a lot of nuance and a lot of distinction in this kind of arcane body of law, the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and we've helped to reauthorize the act with stronger conservation tenets to make sure that it's more toothsome in ending overfishing and promoting healthy rebuilt fish stocks. And then Ocean Conservancy spent a lot of time working on marine debris and plastics internationally. We've led the International Coastal Cleanup. We actually founded the International Coastal Cleanup in the mid-1980s in Texas and then expanded it to over 100 countries. Reef has partnered with us on the International Coastal Cleanup in the past. It happens on the 3rd Saturday in September every year. And we've engaged millions of people to clear up millions of pounds of debris. Obviously, just picking trash up isn't going to solve the marine debris problem. We need to fix marine debris before it ever enters the oceans. But this is a really important advocacy tool, I think, the ICC is. Has anyone participated in the ICC before? I see some hands. So thanks for getting out there and cleaning up and spreading the message. But I'm here to talk about Florida, right? Why Florida? What is it that makes Florida special and worth saving, right? Why is Florida getting so much attention these days? Does anyone know how many people move to Florida every day?
Too many.
What, venture a guess, venture a guess. 4,000's too high. 1,000's bang on. It's 1,000 people move to Florida every single day. And why are people moving to Florida?
No taxes.
No taxes. Okay, so there's economic reasons. Who here is a native Floridian? Okay, so who's not a native Floridian? Okay, why did you all come here? Diving, warmth.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is the environment, right? This resplendent, beautiful ecosystem that's on these walls around you and surrounding us all over this beautiful, amazing beach, right? People are coming here. Yes, there are economic reasons for sure. But I think really people are coming in droves because Florida has something that no other state really has. I mean, what state has the longest coastline in the contiguous US? Florida. What state has the longest coastline in the US? Alaska. Which would you rather move to? Right? No offense against Alaska. It's got a lot going for it, but it doesn't have this, right? So why Florida? It has this amazing environment that we want to protect. And what you guys are here when you go out on the reef, what you're looking for, what you're passionate about. The Florida Coral Reef Tract spans 300 miles down Florida's coast from Martin County to the Dry Tortugas, right? I mean, this is the 3rd longest barrier reef in the world, right? After the Great Barrier Reef and the Mesoamerican Reef. I mean, Florida has it, right? But what Florida also has is incredible risk staring down that environment. What are some of the risks that you're seeing here in the Keys or that you're aware about or passionate about? Sea level rise, which I think this one shows.
Coral bleaching.
Coral bleaching, that's climate related, but it's also nutrient related. What else? More intense and severe tropical weather. What else? Shout out anything else out.
Mosquitoes.
Well, with more frequent and severe tropical weather, you might have more mosquitoes.
Dengue. We have dengue now.
Dengue, yeah. So Florida has this amazing environment, but it also has these incredible threats that it's facing.
Is overdevelopment considered a problem?
Absolutely, I think.
Stress on aquifers, stress on energy.
Sure, or I think development that is not focused on sustainability. I think that stresses existing infrastructure that further compromises the environment.
But is there a concern that with 1,000 people
Absolutely.
run out of water and
For sure. So compromised water quality is certainly one of the key environmental issues that we're working on and that we identify. And so I'm going to go through some doom and gloom slides here. We're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, all right? So
Bring us out the other side.
what's this fish? What kind? Goliath. This is a Goliath, right? And how a Goliath grouper can get to be 800 pounds, can get to be 8 feet long. This is a pretty big specimen. This is maybe a 200-pound one. What killed this animal? Red tide killed this animal. And this was killed in the 2018 red tide event in Southwest Florida. And it's kind of remarkable that red tide which is a microorganism, it's naturally occurring, can bloom in such profusion that it can kill large specimens like this, but not just one or two, but thousands of tons of marine wildlife has been killed in recent years due to red tide events. Red tide is naturally occurring, like I said, but its blooms can be made worse by warming water temperatures and by excessive nutrient inputs. Nutrient inputs are human-born predominantly and cause that are fueling these blooms. They're nitrogen and they're phosphorus, which come from human waste. Yes?
Does dredging affect the red tide at all?
Dredging could release nutrients that could make a bloom worse, or it could affect salinity that would make a bloom worse. Now, let's remember I'm a lawyer, not a scientist, but I do work on these issues, so I have some awareness of that. But the point being that red tide can be a really significant killer, despite the fact that it's natural, and we as human beings are making it worse. This is a sea turtle in St. Pete Beach, green sea turtle, not a very big one. This was during the 2020-2021 red tide event in West Central Florida. Also, red tide impacts marine reptiles. It can kill marine mammals like dolphins and manatees. And so this is a red tide related picture, but we've also heard in recent years that we've lost 25% of the state's manatee population. Yeah, okay, very good. Well, and this picture's from just January 1st, 2021 to August 13th, 2021. Now, as of last summer, 2023, Florida had lost 20% of its manatee population, which at the time was around only 6,000. We've actually had some improvements in manatee recruitment. More manatees are growing up to adulthood, it seems, and the FWC is putting out a new assessment this spring. So we're optimistic that we might have, despite the fact that we lost 25% of the manatee population a year or two ago, we may have had enough manatee reproductivity to overcome that and actually increase the overall size of the manatee population. We don't know yet, we'll know in May or so. But what we see here and what we knew at the time is that we were killing manatees in Florida. So manatees need 100 pounds of seagrass per individual to survive. And that's 10% of their weight. They're huge animals, right? So if we're killing off seagrass because of things like red tide events or other nutrient-borne pollution problems, we're causing those manatees to starve. So yeah, I mean, you see manatees down here. The Keys, you said you've reported one. Maybe those are one of your dots down there. Do you know what killed the manatee that you reported?
It was not a boat strike.
Mhm.
It was during COVID, so they didn't do a necropsy.
They didn't bother with it.
Not a boat strike.
One thing we're seeing more frequently in manatee necropsies is marine debris and plastics in the guts of the animals, including balloons, for example. Manatees are eating balloons. We'll talk more about balloons a little bit later. What's Piney Point? Has anyone heard of Piney Point?
Or the,
No, you're right.
it's mining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is on Tampa Bay. You can actually see Tampa Bay in the background. And this is a mountain, basically. It's a 100+ foot tall mountain that's hollow in the middle and filled with this nutrient-rich radioactive wastewater, which is basically tailings from the phosphate mining industry. And Bone Valley in the Peace River region of Central Florida is one of the world's largest producers of phosphates, which is a key component of fertilizer. Piney Point is one of these facilities that holds these tailings, and it failed and ended up dumping 400 million gallons of this nutrient-rich radioactive wastewater into Tampa Bay. And what did we have immediately on the tails of that event? Does anyone know, or were you reading the news at the time? A massive red tide event. This was in 2021, April 2021. And one of the biggest red tide events came directly on the heels of that. So again, a really concrete example of our human impact on the environment, whether it's through our commercial enterprises, our individual choices. The fact is that us humans have really shaped and impacted our coastal environment. And what's going on here? Anyone know where the St. Lucie River is? It flows east out of Lake Okeechobee. And Lake Okeechobee is also nutrient rich because we have put huge agricultural plantations on the south side of Lake Okeechobee, sugar predominantly, which impacts the flow of water coming out of the lake and causes these nutrients to grow in profusion, to collect in profusion in the lake. They then go out through the St. Lucie and Caloosahatchee rivers and cause these blue-green algal events to occur, which are just as bad and just as severe as red tide, and can be just as lethal, but also, cause this guacamole algae sort of fouling of boats and property and whatnot. Climate change. This is 2 blocks from where I live in St. Petersburg, downtown St. Petersburg. This is just sunny day flooding that we have now. Y'all are used to sunny day flooding down here, or in Miami. Yeah. We have it in West Central Florida too. I mean, it's basically taking Florida by storm. So a major concern in an urban environment. You've seen this picture in Miami Beach of an octopus who can crawl up through the storm drain during another sunny day flooding event. And we're seeing, again, more frequent, more severe tropical weather. Sunny day flooding is where the water level exceeds an average water level without a storm, precipitation or storm surge. Yeah. And it's happening because basically we have more water in the ocean from a changing climate. Big Pine Key. This was during, anyone remember this hurricane? Yeah. Hurricane Irma. Yeah, it was Hurricane Irma. And so, we're seeing more frequent and more severe tropical weather statewide. I mean, for several years going, we've run out of names for hurricanes, right? Because we've had so many. Anyone know where Bluntstown is? Where would you guess? It's in Florida. Where in Florida is Bluntstown? You're right. And it's west of Tallahassee. It's over by the Apalachicola River. This is actually near Mexico Beach. It's 45 miles inland from Mexico Beach. And Hurricane Michael, if anyone remembers that one, came ashore at Mexico Beach, but it wreaked havoc 45 miles inland. So the power in these storms is getting more frequent, more severe as well. Not just more frequent, but more severe. And then marine debris and plastics. This is Panama City Beach. What do you think caused this kind of debris situation? Spring break. Right? So individual responsibility is failing here, I think. But, we can go and pick this up. But, you got to teach folks that this is really not acceptable. But we're picking up, 8 million pounds of marine debris in the ocean every year. We're just taking that out. And that's an amount that you could dump a dump truck into the ocean every single minute filled with plastics alone, when I'm just talking about plastics, right? So it's a huge amount of debris going into the oceans. And it's not just affecting, the way the beach looks, but this debris is getting into the ecosystems. This oyster catcher is feeding a cigarette butt to its chick. This is Paso, that's St. Pete Beach. So the plastics can enter the ecosystem. They can enter the human body as well. And in fact, human beings ingest as much as a credit card's worth of plastic every week. And we're getting it from things that we consume, including beer, shellfish, drinking water. It's often in the container that you're consuming the product out of. And it's as much as a credit card's worth of plastic. It's not like you're actually getting that. You could be in the worst possible scenario. You're probably not, but you could be. So, you might want to consult your physician. But we're seeing debris accumulate, in wildlife in a bigger scale as well. This whale washed up. It was in the Mud Keys. This was the summer before last, I believe. This is a sperm whale. It beached itself. It was lethargic and ultimately died. And NOAA with FWC did a necropsy, and they found this mass in its gut. And that mass was wasn't just fishing gear, but it included fishing gear. It also included plastics, plastic bags, things like that. Basically, the whale had, choked itself on debris that we humans had left in the environment for it. So this is all pretty awful, right? How are you feeling? Pretty good? So what are you going to do about it? Like, what are we going to do about this huge series of problems, right? Like, we see it as an all hands on deck moment, right? We need everyone. That's why it's important people like you are coming out to this room. But that's why we at Ocean Conservancy are assembling big teams of people to get together to actually make a difference. So here you've got everyone from lobbyists to scientists to advocates to graphic designers to educators, all working together to make a difference for Florida. And we have a political objective, okay? It's a discrete political objective, and it's one that I think is really important in Florida, because in Florida, we have a very conservative legislature and a very conservative executive. And if the environment is a progressive issue, are we ever going to make progress in a conservative environment? The answer is no. And so what we want to do is make supporting healthy oceans in Florida tantamount to supporting corn in Iowa or in Indiana. You said you were from Indiana, right? I mean, there you cannot get elected to office as a Democrat or a Republican if you don't support corn. And we want that to be the case in Florida too. And I think we're slowly seeing some uptake there. And if you look at the current governor compared to his predecessor, there has been more investment in issues related to the marine environment. There hasn't been nearly enough. We're still billions of dollars away, but it is a start of something, I think, when you see conservatives taking up environmental issues, because it's really an apolitical issue, right? We want to build echo chambers around our elected officials, regardless of party affiliation. And we do that by doing everything from gaining earned media to having talks like this, to working with educators, to working with local governments, to actually going up there and lobbying for legislation that we support, and actually writing the legislation for legislators to bring. So I said we'll talk about balloons, right? Did you know how many balloons can you release into the air in Florida right now? No, 9. 10 or more, you're breaking the law. Right now, you can release up to 9 balloons into the sky every 24 hours. And where do those balloons end up? The ocean. So we wrote a law with our partners to close that loophole and make it so that you can't release balloons anymore. And we have Republican sponsors who have moved it through the House. It's currently with the Senate. We expect the governor to sign it once the Senate passes it, and we'll close that loophole, right? And so I think that, 15 years ago, there wasn't a chance of a conservative legislature making that kind of move. But now we are closing that loophole on plastics.
What will be the result?
You can't release any balloons.
But it's intentional. So you can still buy a crap load of balloons and then half of them get away accidentally.
I don't. Well, it is intent. There is an intentionality aspect, but I still think that could be there's an enforceability question for sure. Yes.
What about our federal Congressman Carlos Gimenez?
Well, I'm talking about state legislature.
Yeah, I know, but what about at the DC level?
Yeah, we do. We're working, with people across the aisle on things like a foam act. There's a foam act that we have in play right now where we're working on basically banning styrofoam at the federal level. Now, does that have a chance right now or in this particular session? Maybe not, but we are building support. Jimenez is not a great advocate at this particular point on issues like that, and wasn't really a very good advocate when he was mayor in Miami. But I think that, I think he's slowly going to be changing, or he's not going to be in office for a lot longer, in my opinion. Yes.
I'm not sure if I got this straight, but I heard that there was a law that you couldn't fertilize anything during the summer, and
Yeah.
that was overturned, or repealed, or whatever happened to it. And is that true?
No. Last legislative session, a law was passed that said that no new fertilizer ordinances could be enacted by a municipality, meaning that there are about 120 fertilizer ordinances in place in Florida right now, meaning that like the city of Miami has a fertilizer ordinance that says you cannot put fertilizer down during hurricane season from June to September, say, or June to October. That is still the law, but if the village of Key Biscayne wanted to enact a law. They cannot do that now until the University of Florida has conducted a study to see about the viability of fertilizer ordinances. So it doesn't invalidate existing ordinances. It says new ordinances can't come along, and nothing is happening in this session to further advance fertilizer bans, I guess is what you'd call it. It's a very convoluted matter. Yeah. Let's finish this presentation, then we'll do lots of questions. So other things we're working on, water quality reforms across the state. We're talking about that when we're talking about fertilizer ordinances, for example. We're talking about that when we're talking about other existing tools in the toolkit, like working on basin management action plans, getting the Florida DEP to enforce existing laws on the books, and basically ensuring that nitrogen and phosphorus aren't out there creating these red tide and blue-green algal events. Climate change, working statewide, a lot of it's about education and awareness. I mean, in Florida, up until just a few years ago, state employees couldn't even say climate change. That's changed. So it's an education and awareness piece as much as an actual work on developing policy solutions, like the creation of a chief resilience office. Also working in communities that are going to be especially impacted by climate change. So thinking about climate gentrification as an issue. Are we familiar with climate gentrification? Climate gentrification is, where people who live further inland in affordable neighborhoods are going to be pushed out by people who live on the coasts in neighborhoods that are going to become inundated, right? So basically wealthy coastal dwellers, say in Miami Beach, are going to be able to completely overtake little Haiti, and are doing so right now, which is on the mainland in Miami. So we fear, and I think a lot of folks fear, that as you face situations of abandonment, coastal abandonment, which we've talked about in the Keys, you're going to have very significant impacts on marginalized communities inland, socioeconomically marginalized communities inland, and that's something that needs to be addressed and hasn't been addressed yet. We also work a lot on education and outreach initiatives. We work in K through 12 schools and in post-secondary institutions to get the word out on these issues, and with teachers. And we work with local governments. We've talked about local government a lot. We have formal partnerships with Miami, Miami Beach, Orlando, Tampa, with Jacksonville, with Pinellas County, with Miami-Dade County, working on all of these issues that we've talked about, because we think that this all-hands-on-deck approach really starts from the bottom up. It's not just an issue that Jimenez can deal with in DC. It's something that needs to emanate from Miami City Hall, from the village of Layton, all the way up to DC, and it's everyone from top to bottom that needs to be involved. And so we also need your help, right? And so we need you, and you are engaging on these issues. But it's stuff that you can do, whether it's a cleanup like we talked about, the International Coastal Cleanup. You can continue to participate in that. Go to signuptocleanup.org, and you can get involved there. Make personal choices like stopping the use of single-use plastic items, which I'm sure many of you do. I see many of you wearing plastic beads. I hope you will not just throw them in the garbage and recycle them for future years. In West Central Florida, where I live in Tampa, we have Gasparilla, which is like our Mardi Gras, right? And we have bead recycling programs so that those beads get reused year after year at the same Gasparilla events. Take 5 minutes for turtles by cleaning up debris. Eat sustainable local seafood. Support your local fishermen. These are all issues that actually help lead to a healthier ocean and a more vibrant ocean. When you eat domestic wild-caught U.S. seafood, you're really supporting the blue ribbon fisheries management regime in the world. And then, of course, get involved in advocacy yourself. Write your local elected officials letters. Participate in agency comment periods. Go up to Tallahassee. Get involved in the process. And you really are heard from, and your voice does make a difference. And so with that, I'll answer questions now. I'm happy to answer anything that I didn't kind of get to as we were talking, but yeah, really glad you're all here, and thanks for listening.
I'll let you call on who
Sure.
you like. If you could repeat the
Yes.
question in the microphone so that our people online can hear the questions and we have.
You got it.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I couldn't get through the paywall.
Okay.
I saw an article that they were taking out the word climate change from our local statutes.
Okay.
Is that true?
So the question is are they taking out climate change from our local statutes? And I'm assuming you mean the state legislature. I don't think that's true. I haven't heard that. I'm not sure what that's actually in reference to. There's no bill right now that I know of that would do that. I would say, though, that there definitely could be editorializing done by factions that don't believe in climate change to take climate change out as they draft rules or legislation in the regular process. But there is no bill right now that does that on its own. Yes, sir.
A local issue here is it's a federal issue, but it has a state overlap. So my question is focused on the state overlap. The sanctuary is about to amend its rules for the first time ever here, the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and all that's a federal level issue. Once the plan comes out, the governor has the ability to veto application of anything. I think it's a line item veto within state waters, which is very significant because it's 3 miles out.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that? And is there
Yeah.
plans to lobby and try to influence the governor?
Yes. So the question is as the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary goes through its restoration blueprint, which is what it's called, and it's a revamp of its existing regulatory authority, can the governor of Florida, through a line item veto, affect the application of the restoration blueprint? And the answer is yes, to a certain extent. The governor could line item veto items through the budgetary process. That's what he has line item veto authority over, is when the legislature produces a budget and hands it to the governor can go through and cut items. So if he has a bee in his bonnet on specific items, or if there's a specific political reason for him to line item some of these budgetary requests for the 3 mile nautical limit, then he could do that. And I think it is a legitimate fear. And I think if you're concerned about that, you should be reaching out to the governor, to the governor's office in particular, but also to your local elected official, your state senator and your state rep, to tell them that you don't want these items line item vetoed. I can't think of any item that's in the budget right now that would fit that description, but I think it is a reasonable concern. I will say that the governor came back from his election campaign, and he has some political enemies in the Republican Party in particular that I think he'll be on the warpath for. And so if there's an elected official from the Keys or from South Florida that's put something out for the Florida Coral Reef Tract, for example, he may be very inclined to line item veto that if they didn't support him in his presidential bid. And that's what we're seeing. That's how we're seeing him on the warpath right now. Retribution, political retribution to the T. Yep. Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And what I was wondering is, because of so many of the solutions and problems have these political ties, do you folks do something like the gun lobby does, of keeping a rating system of how your legislators vote on different issues and so forth, and help inform the voters as to who is your friend and who is not your friend? Do you do that?
So the question is does my organization rate or rank elected officials in terms of how effective they are on environmental issues related to the ocean? And the answer is no. And the answer why it's no is because that's the activity of a 501c4 organization. And so we're prohibited from doing that activity because it's electioneering, it's politicking. So we as a C3 organization work exclusively for charitable purposes for the environment, and we're not allowed to engage in electioneering. We are allowed to lobby all we want. Well, actually not all we want, but within a certain lobby limit on existing legislation, but not on campaign issues. So there are C4 organizations that do just what you said. And the Sierra Club is a great example of that.
But so you don't do action alerts?
We do action alerts on legislation, but not on campaigns or elected officials.
So how would one sign up for those action alerts?
So if you go to oceanconservancy.org, join our mailing list, and we have action alerts related to the Keys, to Florida, and we have action alerts, for example, on this balloon legislation where you can sign up. It'll send a letter in your name directly to your elected official so that they know that you care about that issue. Did that answer your question, sir? On the C4?
I was actually sort of answering, I was going to ask the second cousins.
Yes. So Sierra Club is a C4 organization, and they do a lot of really great advocacy work in Florida in terms of ranking and giving scorecards to individuals running for office. Another good one is called votewater.org, which is the C4 arm of the Friends of the Everglades. It used to be called Bull Sugar, and now they're called votewater.org, but they do excellent scorekeeping. They do exactly that, and they'll tell you exactly where your elected sits on all those issues that you care about. Questions? Yes, sir.
Does the Ocean Conservancy have a position on what's going to happen if we exceed this 1.5 degree temperature increase?
Do we have a position on it?
On where we're going to be?
Do we have a position on? Okay, so the question is does Ocean Conservancy have a position on where we'll be in terms of a 1.5 degree centigrade increase in global temperature? Honestly, I don't know what our position is on that, other than it would be cataclysmic if we exceed it, and we're doing absolutely everything we can to prevent that from happening by advocating at the COP. We send a delegation to the Council of the Parties working on that every year. I'm not a part of that team, but yeah, I know that we're trying as hard as we can to stay under 1.5. And as if the question is, will we exceed it or not? I don't know. That's not a very good answer. I apologize. Yeah.
Just a few mini questions as a visitor from one of the bluest areas in Massachusetts. Do you guys do anything in the North Atlantic? And do you know of any environmental activists or advocacy groups that are coming from the conservative side? And then the last thing, sort of follow on one of the slides you showed in terms of this University of Florida studies, and like what are the criteria for whether something is approved? Thank you very much.
So the first question is North Atlantic. Do we work in the North Atlantic, and are there?
Your organization, you're involved in the Gulf of Maine.
Oh yes, we work in the Gulf of Maine. We work with Fishermen and Magnuson Stevens Act defense in the Gulf of Maine, but also in ghost gear removal, which is where we take out derelict lobster traps predominantly. What was your next question?
Whether there are conservative or right-leaning groups that you're allied with or that have a common mission with you guys.
Yes, there are conservative groups that have a common mission with us, often from the sportsman community. I think of the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership or the American Conservative Coalition or Conservation Coalition, I think it's called. I mean, there are groups. I would say that the conservative groups mostly are the hook and bullet crowd, as we call them, right? Sportsman oriented, and we do ally with them a lot on things like Magnuson Stevens defense, but also, sportsmen really hate to see fish stocks decimated by plastics, by bad water quality. So, we can get them readily to engage, and they're very vocal supporters. And what's your third question?
You talk about the University of Florida needing to approve new permissions. I'm not familiar at all with that policy.
For the questions about the University of Florida study to determine the efficacy of fertilizer ordinances. So last year's legislation said that no new fertilizer ordinances could be passed. And while that's happening, the University of Florida and Florida Sea Grant, which is housed at the University of Florida, have to conduct a study about the efficacy of existing fertilizer ordinances. And that study was completed and issued late last year, early this year. And they basically came up with a non-conclusion because those scientists actually were pretty reticent at being pigeonholed by the legislature and being told to say whether or not these fertilizer ordinances were worth putting in play. They actually felt like they were unfairly being brought into the political equation. And so basically that study ended up as a nothing burger, you could say. And here we are still spinning our wheels, and we're just in a position where we can't enact new fertilizer ordinances right now.
These are ordinances that restrict fertilizer. I guess I'm totally unfamiliar with.
So you're not permitted to put fertilizer down during the rainy season in Florida, because the fertilizer, which is predominantly based out of nitrogen and phosphorus, washes into the water and then fuels these harmful algal events. So you want to make sure you're not putting fertilizer down during the rainy season. You can preclude selling it or putting it down during rainy season. You're not allowed to enact new regulations like that right now, but all the existing 120 can stay in place. Yeah, sure.
I think I'll take the privilege of the last
Sure.
question. So one of the things we care a lot about here at REEF is equipping the next generation of advocates and protectors of the ocean environment. Raise your hand, Maritime interns and fellows, marine conservation interns and fellows here. And they come from a variety of backgrounds and all hope, I believe, to make an important difference in making some progress on this. What advice do you give to college-age ocean lovers? I'll let you repeat the question.
So the question is what advice would I give to college-age ocean lovers or young people who are interested in getting involved in marine conservation? I suspect is making a difference. Well, I mean, so I'm a 6th-generation Floridian. I always knew growing up on the Indian River Lagoon that I wanted to work on marine conservation issues. This is literally my life's calling, and like I just cannot be more happy to do what I do every day. And so I think that I'm able to bring to this work a lot of passion about it. And I think that if you're truly passionate about conservation work, you can pursue that passion and you will succeed because your passion will shine through in what you're trying to do. So really focus on your passion and narrow your passion. If you're interested in marine conservation of the upper Florida Keys, then focus and drill down on that. If you're interested in a different ecosystem, go work on that. If you're interested in the flower-loving desert fly or whatever, go out to the desert and work on that, and don't let geography restrain you from pursuing that passion. And I think if you're passionate about it, your success will follow.
Wow, thank you. That's a great. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I have a lovely award of recognition of appreciation.
Thanks so much.
to
Appreciate
give
it.
you.
That's wonderful.
Thank
Thanks.
you, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, it's got the new logo.
Yeah,
I like it.
new logo. That's cool. New logo.